Thank you all for joining us today. I do believe we've gotten everybody out of the weight room. So, Suzanne, would you like to go ahead and get us started?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Suzanne Schneider, and I'm the Associate Director at Lincoln Littles, and I'll be facilitating our session today. And the webinar is titled The Impact of On-Site Early Education and Childcare, Primrose School at Hudl. Joining us today, we have Dr. Katie Bass, Policy Research Manager for First Five Nebraska, Mark Ketchum, VP of Operations and Chief of Staff for Hudl, and Dr. Betsy Tonagis, the owner of Primrose Hudl and Primrose at Wilderness Hills. So, welcome everyone, and let's get started. My first question is for Mark today. And Mark, what was Hudl's motivation for exploring on site childcare?
Yeah, great to be with all of you. Very excited to talk about our experience. The need for us really came from just our evolving workforce and evolving demographics. I started at Hudl 14 plus years ago when we were a company of 30 people. And back in 2011, it was a lot of people who this was their first job right out of college, very, very young workforce, generally speaking. But as we continued to grow and we saw our average age skew a little bit higher as we grew, we started to see more and more children being born. And one of the fun parts of Hudl is we always send all company emails whenever there's a baby that's born. And so it's really cool to just get to see a quick picture and just see what the name is. And again, back in the early days of Hudl, this was probably once every 6 months, maybe every couple of years. But as we continue to grow, this started to change to be once a month, once a week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. And so we saw that this was a need that was really starting to pop up for our workforce. We heard it in our engagement survey. We heard it directly from different members of our team. We call ourselves Hudlies, so we heard it from Hudlies. And so it was really about trying to evolve our benefits packages, trying to evolve what we have to offer to meet the needs of our team. And so that's kind of what spurred this in the first place for us.
Yeah, it's nice that you were so receptive to what was happening in your facility there. So when you were seeking a partner to join you in this venture, what did you look for? What kinds of things were important to you?
Yeah, it was, I think, really important to make sure that we had the right partners in place from the start. We obviously have a business to run, and we wanted to make sure that this took really is we didn't want to become childcare experts. We wanted to be able to have trust and confidence in whoever it was we were going to partner with, that they were going to be able to run the show for us so that we could focus on what we do as a business and we could trust that they were able to handle things. I think it was really important to just make sure that we were aligned from like a values perspective. When I say that, one of our values is play to win. So when we get into something, we want to make sure that we do it really, really well. And so we wanted to make sure that if this was going to be something we were going to provide in childcare, it was with people and businesses who do this really, really well. We didn't want to get in and kind of do it halfway. We wanted to make sure we were going to go all in and provide really quality care. I think the other really key component of this is being able to have tough conversations. Again, one of our values is being respectfully blunt. And so finding the right providers, the right partners, where we can just kind of hash out what are those key decision points that we need to agree on in order for this to be successful, and not dance around it, not avoid the tough issues, the tough conversations, but let's just get in a room and hammer out the details so that we're all on the same page. And when we met with Betsy and Jesse and the Primrose team, I think we hit it off right from the start. We had a really good relationship right from the start. It felt like we had a really good rapport. And honestly, we worked very closely with them from the early stages of this discussion. And it's been an absolutely incredible partnership. Betsy and I meet all the time. We talk all the time. And I still don't know the first thing about running a childcare facility, but Betsy is awesome. She dumbs it down for someone like me to understand what's going on. And it's been, I would say, an incredibly successful partnership just a couple of years in.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That leads me into a question for you, Betsy. You already owned Primrose at Wilderness Hills, and so what motivated you to submit a proposal to partner with Hudl?
Well, I first want to give a shout out because Mrs. States is on our webinar and she's one of our former pre-K teachers. So it's good to see her. She's doing wonderful things in early childhood and we miss her, but thanks for joining us. Our Wilderness Hills location was getting more full and more full. I had 2 children here in care in Lincoln, and just the idea of being able to bring early childhood education at a high caliber, caring about the whole child to more children throughout Lincoln was a goal of ours, but we knew just with the state of early childhood and where it was at, a good avenue maybe to partner with a business that would want to join us on this venture. And so like Mark had alluded to, we were looking for a company that had shared values of transparency and doing the right thing and just having high expectation when it comes to running a business. The community mentality and the season of life kind of intertwines for both of us. I'm all about community and building relationships with families. Having a young family is hard sometimes, and so having something on site where families can engage with one another in this season of life was important to us. And then I was really curious about the employer retention aspect of it. We have talked about it, there's studies about it, but I'm like, I wonder if this could really work here in Lincoln. And at the time there was really no early childhood center in downtown Lincoln, and I felt this might be a good opportunity. So when Hudl had said we're looking into this, my husband and I, we dug a little bit more into the background of Hudl and how they operate and who they are, just to make sure that we would be on the same path. And then as Mark said, when we first met, we were incredibly transparent of, you know, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. And you'll need to trust us to be the best provider in early childhood education and care possible. And know that we'll give you, transparency and ask the questions and be in consistent communication, but we shouldn't be an additional arm of Hudl that needs to be managed by Hudl and kind of monitored that way. So conversations also within the community of people needing access to care and it would be great if someone could partner with a business in Lincoln and what that would look like. And so I think both of us are up to a pretty good challenge. And so we thought, well, if there's going to be someone in Lincoln who's going to do it, we're going to do it and we'll do it right. So that's what prompted us to throw our hat in the ring to see if it would be something that we could accomplish together.
Well, clearly from both of you, it's not just a quick decision. There's a lot of thought process involved in these decisions. And I'm curious about the timeline. This is also something that doesn't just happen overnight. It isn't a fast venture. And so I'd like to hear from both of you about a sense of the timeline and what were the stages and what things were important to consider along the way.
Man, that's a great question. So if I kind of work backwards, we opened the center in July of 2023. But our first conversations really started late 2020, early 21. That was kind of when Hudl made the decision that this was something that we wanted to go all in with. And so we put out an RFP. We had 3 different providers reach back out with proposals for us to review. And again, as we talked about with the last question, I think both sides felt like it was a really good alignment around values and how we thought we could make this work successfully for both Primrose and for Hudl. But again, those conversations started call it October, December of 2020. So it was almost 3 years that from those early conversations till when the center opened. But there was a lot that was included in that process. Once we selected Primrose, we had to get details around the agreement itself. We had to figure out what the design of the physical space was going to look like. We knew that we wanted it to be on site, and we knew that there was space available at our Haymarket location down on the first floor that we could potentially utilize for this. And so luckily we have a couple in-house architects who work for Hudl. We were able to work with the Primrose design team as well and come up with what we felt like was a really good design that would allow for us to have space for plenty of children to hopefully be enrolled in the center. But that was probably like 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Like early 2021 was kind of when we went through these kind of early stages. Let's see what else.
It's kind of like birthing a baby. You forget a lot of the things that you go through. And it was COVID during that time too.
Yeah.
So
in preparation for this panel, I went back and looked through, I had like a running notes document, and just seeing some of the different conversations and the different dates was like, wow, I forgot that we had all of these different meetings for multiple years to make sure that we had all the details worked out here.
And they came down, the design team actually came down to the South location to walk the building to talk about, what is a potty pod? Why do we have one in a classroom, and why is it important for early childhood education? So I am so grateful to the team, because I'm like, once we explained it, they're like, oh, that makes sense. Those kinds of design elements that may seem, have a small element are a big deal in early childhood, having the restrooms located inside of the classroom so children don't have to leave to use the restroom. So they're very open to the process in our center down here. It looks very similar to down south, but it's obviously a little bit unconventional just because of the space constraints in the playground area.
And then we also, so continuing on that timeline, we announced it to our team internally. This would have been probably spring of 2022. So a little bit over a year before the center actually opened. We announced it to our team. There was a lot of excitement. We had a lot of people express interest in wanting to sign up. Construction started later in 2022, again, with the assumption, I think May was what our initial goal was with when the center would be ready to rock. Classic construction delays, ran into a bunch of those. So it didn't ultimately end up opening until late July of 2023. But that was, it was 2.5+ years of kind of work, discussions, hard conversations, planning, preparation, before we finally got to the grand opening, which was an awesome moment when we finally opened the Center for Business.
Yeah, and Betsy, is there anything you want to add about the timeline? It's a little different from the business side than it is from the childcare side. And what was happening on your side with the timeline, and what kinds of things were you navigating?
We did have to navigate with the agreement, since you're basically marrying two companies together, where there were certain things like with our iPads and our technology insurance, like who carries that, and how do we lease the iPads from Hudl? Does Hudl provide the iPads just the way that it's structured? So I felt like we had a good rough draft, and luckily, with Primrose Legal and Hudl Legal, it was easy to go back and forth fairly quickly. But there were things that, as we're like, we think we got it, and then you hit something where you have to buy something, and you're like, wait a minute, like this will impact something else. And so what we have now, I feel like, is a very good, solid draft. There's very few things that come up, but there were certainly things that were like, oh, that wouldn't have even crossed our minds until someone else had prompted a question from the outside. So we were navigating, making sure we had all of our curriculum, and hiring our staff and training our staff, making sure we were ready for grand opening. And then, once we finally opened the doors, like Mark had said, we all took a deep breath of like, oh my gosh, we finally made it. This is awesome. So it's been a good venture, and the parents that are in that photo celebrating with us at our opening are still in attendance and on their second baby, and in some cases their third baby now. So that's been really fun to see and be on this journey with them.
Well, thank you. This is another question for both of you, and we'd like to know more about how the partnership between Hudl and Primrose School at Hudl is structured. What does that look like?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it relatively simple, but for us, we basically have the entire amount of trust in Betsy and Jesse to kind of run the center, the day-to-day completely. So there's no real involvement from Hudl from a day-to-day perspective. They've built a fantastic team that runs the show downstairs. And so if they need something, if they have questions about something, they know they can come to me to ask those questions. But by and large, again, we're not childcare experts. We want them to run the center in the best way that they see fit. And if they need things from us, from Hudl, they'll ask those things. All expenses, including payroll, we analyze them weekly, we analyze them monthly. Hudl's responsible for all expenses related to the center. With that being said, we're also, any revenue that comes in from tuition, it comes to Hudl as well. So it's something where we're responsible for the success or the failure from a dollars and cents perspective. But we have Betsy and Jesse and team kind of running the show for us from an operational perspective. We know that we try to conservatively budget as best we can. We know there's going to be unintended expenses. We've actually got a new room that we're going to be opening up hopefully pretty soon. And so we're going to have to order furniture for that. And again, I've got full trust in Betsy and team to put together that plan for how to make that room come to life. And we know there's going to be a cost with that. But again, that's something that, you know, we have all the trust in the world in them to run for us. We meet monthly to go over financials and enrollment, which is really helpful from our side. So we can get at a glance just how the center is doing. Are we bringing in the revenue that we expected to bring in? Were expenses higher or lower than what we expected? How is enrollment trending? Are we adding people? Are people leaving? Why are they leaving? Why are people coming on? So it's really helpful to have those monthly kind of budget meetings to go over the details. But again, we try to minimize the involvement from other members of Hudl as best we can, so that it's really just a couple folks from the finance team and me who are checking on this more regularly and making sure that things are moving in the right direction. But overall, it's, again, really, really working well for us right now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, our role is making sure to mitigate the financial impact in terms of a loss. So we were very upfront of, if you want to open up a childcare on site, historically, this is not going to be a moneymaker. This is an investment. It is a benefit that you are offering to your employees for a variety of reasons. And so our goal every single month is we budget conservatively. We go through line after line of what was spent, where it was spent, if there's questions why it was spent. If there's an item over a certain threshold, we go and ask for that ahead of time, unless it's like an immediate need of a broken window or something like that that can be fixed immediately. But otherwise, we're very transparent about where the money goes and how it all benefits the staff that we have and the students that we serve. So,
and kind of on that note, I think one good example of just how we work really well together is we have always held out. The most important priority for us is to make sure that there are spots available for Hudl families when they need them. And Betsy and Jesse's perspective, they agree with that, but they're also trying to make sure this is successful from a revenue perspective for Hudl. And so they've come to us multiple times and said, hey, do you want to open up additional rooms to the public so that we can drive additional enrollment and thus additional revenue? And we have said, no, we're good. We want to hold those younger rooms held close to the chest so that if and when another Hudl baby is born, they don't have to wait on a wait list behind someone who is publicly enrolled to be able to get into the center. And we're okay eating that lack of revenue coming in so that we can hold that out for, again, our Hudl families who might be expecting and we don't know yet. And so that's been a good, healthy discussion that we've had multiple times over the past couple of years. And we've said, no, we're good. We're okay. Like, we don't need to have this revenue right now. We know it's an investment. We want to make sure this is for Hudl families first and foremost. So I think that's a good example.
And then 2 weeks later, I asked him, are you really sure about this? And
correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, I think, like I said, we keep saying it comes back to transparency, trust, and honesty. And I think that you know, that is what kind of fuels both teams to do the best that we can each day with the resources we have. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for both of you for going into a little bit more in depth to that. And I bet, Mark, you know more about childcare than you ever thought you would know.
Yeah, I've learned a lot of things in this role that I didn't think I would ever have learned. So I've been very grateful for that.
I bet so. So I have a question for you, Mark, about benefits and specifically for Hudl employees. How is this benefit structured for the employees at Hudl?
Yeah, we have a reduced rate for enrollment that we provide to Hudlies. I don't have the exact numbers just because it fluctuates depending on the age of the child. We have different rates and different percentages that we work with Betsy and team on to come up with. But it's a really valuable savings compared to what the public rate is that we offer to our team. And we've had a lot of our team members who have been incredibly grateful for that reduced amount that they have. We also take advantage of the 5F tax credit, which provides a tax credit for any employer-provided childcare. We've been taking advantage of that for as long as the center has been around. Our tax team runs with that, and that's been really helpful for us from just an overall business perspective. Outside of those two things, there's just so many intangible things with how we kind of frame this and talk about this. Having your child just right downstairs is awesome. We've heard from so many parents how valuable that is. They don't have to worry about it. They don't have to worry about what pickup and drop off looks like. It's just on the way to work, on the way home from work. It's super duper easy. Being able to breastfeed your child during the day, that's probably the thing I've heard the most. I assume Betsy is probably the same, like that being able to continue to develop that relationship with your young one is just so awesome. And we've heard so many awesome stories about that over the past couple of years. We have a lot of fun events too that we have around our headquarters building. The Halloween parade that's actually coming up just shortly after this webinar is going to be exciting.
We're not going as twins to that, in case you were wondering.
This was unintentional by the two of us, but we've got Thanksgiving lunch coming up. We've got different things that happen around Valentine's Day, around Mother's Day and Father's Day. So there's just lots of really good stuff that happens with the Childcare Center downstairs. I think if you would ask a Hudl team member like what it's like working at headquarters, even if they don't have a kid enrolled, they're probably like, they go downstairs, they see the playground, they see all these laughing, smiling faces, and they're like, it's just great to see this, even if they don't have a kid enrolled. So it's really, really cool. I think the folks who do have children enrolled have built a really strong connection with each other. So you'll see a lot of parents who might not otherwise work together in a normal day-to-day capacity, who have now built these really great, strong relationships with each other because they might have kids who are the same age, who are in the same classroom. So it's just, there's a lot of intangible benefits that come along with having the center on site as well.
And like Mark said, it's great. We belong to their Slack channel as a guest, and so about once a week or once every other week, a parent will take a snapshot from 7th floor down on the playground of like, I get to work and watch my kid play, or they'll go out to the playground and they'll take a snapshot of 3 or 4 kids together, and send it to the group of families that they work with. So it's just the bond between the Hudlies who work here and their kids is just something I can't describe. You just have to experience it. And it's great to see them, tears, laughing, like I didn't sleep last night, share these moments of parenting together. It's just, it's a really cool network that, like I said, I can't really explain to you. It's just fun to see. But also it's been fun to be able to collaborate with the Hudl event planning committee and making sure we're helping to support the zoo event or anything else that they have going on in the office, and making sure that there is a kid component if that's something that they want to include as well. So.
Yeah, well, thank you both for going into a little bit more in depth with the benefits question, because I think when we think about benefits, we think about are there discounts, and how is that built into the cost factor? And so to talk about those other benefits and how that really works it's really important. So thank you. Betsy, you own 2 Primroses, which makes sorry, I was misreading my question. Let me start that again. You own 2 Primrose franchise locations. What makes the on-site location so unique? You named a few things already, but what else?
Beyond that, I think if anybody knows me, I'm a big ideas person. Oh, let's do this on Friday. I can't always do that now because I truly believe with as small as Lincoln is and the families we serve, what we do down here should be replicated to some extent down south, and down south, same down here. And so there are times where I'm like, let's do that. And it's like, oh, I couldn't get it in front of the budget committee just yet this month, so I'll put it on my list for next year. So it's helped me to be more intentional in terms of planning and making sure that those events are coordinated with one another. It has also been great because when we opened this location, we moved a leadership team member from down south to come to this location to make sure that we were building the culture that we wanted to build, replicate the culture down here that we had down south. And so it has been great for our leadership team members to be able to collaborate. We do get our staff together at least once a year to have professional development together as well. And then I keep going back to quality and early childhood education. There isn't something that is centrally located like the Primrose that we have here. And so to be able to have that in the Haymarket, we have families that come from all edges of Lincoln, whether they're a community enrolled member or they're a Hudl member. And so it's great to have just kind of this vast web of families that we're serving from Fallbrook all the way down south, out by 84th and O Street. And then, like I said, the fiduciary responsibility does transfer to both locations, and just making sure that we're continuously focusing not only on the experience that we provide families and the high quality of education, but especially in this time making sure that every single dollar is going towards something that impacts the life of the child and the families that we serve. And so those would be some similarities and a little bit of differences. But
I also want to call out just how impressed I have been and the Hudl team has been with Betsy and just her ability to run this center and just doing it in a way that is still fiscally responsible, but also providing an awesome experience for the folks who take advantage of the center. When we meet monthly to talk about budget, it feels like we're consistently above on the revenue side and below on the expense side because they're always very thoughtful about how we're spending money, trying to get out in front and buying things in bulk in advance so that we have some kind of leftover whenever we need them. So it's been really awesome to see how much they care about that side of things, not just the quality of care, but just making sure that the center is performing as well as possible from a revenue and expense perspective as well.
Yeah, and I think that is, both of you talking make me think about one of the unique things about having the on-site childcare is that, Betsy, you have Mark to sit down with and go through everything, the budget and the planning and the process, where at your other location, it's you and Jesse and the Primrose team there. And so you don't have that outside perspective. So I think that's probably something different.
Yeah, it's just great to collaborate, and she's down in this location often enough where she might just pop up to the fourth floor and just, hey, I've got an idea, I want to talk with you about this, and we'll just get in a room and talk for 15 minutes and come to an agreement, and then boom, she's off and we're running. So it's really, really nice and convenient to be able to have that.
And then we do on 7th floor, Hudl does serve lunch to their employees, and so it's always a good time to pop up there too and just connect with parents on a different level and share something fun that their kid did that morning as well too. So
Thank you. This question is for both of you also. You worked with First 5 Nebraska and Dr. Katie Bass, who's on the call today, to do an independent evaluation. Be curious to know more about why did you want to conduct that evaluation and what were you hoping to learn?
I can speak to this from Hudl's perspective and then feel free to chime in. And first of all, I just want to say Katie and team were absolutely fantastic to work with. They met with us several times. We came up with what the right questions were. They told us what their process was. I felt like it was a really good collaboration to ultimately turn out what I thought was a really positive and helpful report that hopefully other people can take a lot of guidance from if they're thinking about wanting to get involved in childcare. So big shout out to First 5 Nebraska and Katie and team for all of their hard work. I think from Hudl's perspective, there's really two things that really drove us to want to do this. One, we wanted to make sure that the center was providing as much value as we felt like it was. I can't speak for everyone at Hudl, but a lot of people will come and talk to me who are have kids enrolled in the center. They'll say, we absolutely love it. It's awesome. It's an awesome perk. We love taking advantage of it. But I wasn't sure if that was just me with kind of rose-colored glasses hearing these things, and people aren't as willing to share the negative stuff with me. They just want to share the positive stuff. So I really wanted to make sure that we had someone else come in and validate what our assumptions were with regards to how the center was performing for our team. And so again, Katie and her group were really helpful in doing that. They conducted a ton of interviews, and that was one of the things that we hoped to get out of it was, is this center actually doing as well as we think it is? The second one to me was just, we wanted to kind of share our experience more broadly. I know that we're probably on the extreme end in terms of providing on-site childcare for when compared to other Nebraska businesses, but it was something that we feel like has gone really well through the first couple of years, and we wanted to kind of share our experience, both the positives and the negatives, with a broader audience in hopes that it would encourage more businesses to do something like this. Maybe not take the full-on plunge that we did of providing on-site childcare, but at least get involved in some way. Whether that's a small stipend that you provide to your employees once a month or once every couple of weeks, or there's so many ways you can get involved. We wanted to share our experience and hopefully encourage other businesses to get involved.
Yeah, and I would say on that note, there's lots of businesses who have since reached out who are, oh, this is a great idea. It sounds very daunting to them. And so to be able to have somewhat of a playbook of here's the experiences and here are some of the things that the challenges that we encountered, that we worked through, that you can now think of ahead of time was beneficial. And I always, we live in an area of continuous improvement. And so when we know better, we do better. And like Mark said, you hear these stories from parents and you hear how happy kids are and how happy families are. But I said, it's different when it's an interview with a third party who has no affiliation to either one, who, it's at their own time in their own location. And so we really wanted the honest feedback of, how are we doing? How can we improve? How can we be better to serve our families and our students? And so that organic feedback was important to us as well.
Well, thank you both. And Katie, this was your baby, your study that we're going to get into next. So you're up next. And just curious, how did you approach understanding the impact of Primrose School at Hudl? There's so much to this and so much to navigate. So tell us more about how you approach this.
Yeah, first of all, a big thank you to both Mark and Betsy, because when we did start talking about this, one of the things we really wanted at First Five Nebraska was this playbook, right? This tool that could be helpful for not just Hudl and Primrose schools, but for the broader business community who is looking for opportunities to engage in the early care and education conversation. And being able to say, we're going to talk about what we think went well and also what we think did not go as well or that could have gone better, and what we're doing to improve. I mean, that takes a lot of guts and courage to put that out there and share with everyone. And so I really appreciate their willingness to partake in this process. When we started talking originally, we were looking at a lot of assessment data. We were thinking about, do we include information on engagement surveys, or do we look at long-term trends with employee retention, which is definitely something that I think we have recommended for the long term, but that's hard to do at the 2-year mark. Right. And if you're waiting much beyond 2 years, right, you don't want to get too far down the line and find out that things aren't going the way you thought they were going, or here were areas we could improve. So we really switched methods as we started to think about this to primarily focus on the experiences of the parents who were enrolled, right? That was obviously kind of our first target group. The employees at Primrose School at Hudl who are providing that care day in and day out. How are they seeing it? What does it look like from their perspective? And then a really important group we wanted to talk to, and we worked to make sure we could access, are what about those parents and families who do not access the childcare? When we talked about this with both Mark and Betsy in different conversations as we were kind of designing this study, Betsy wanted to know what would make a person choose not to enroll in on-site childcare, right? Just to think about what are those thought processes? What are those decisions? And then one of the things that we commonly hear at First Five Nebraska when we're kind of out talking to the business community is that employers are hesitant to provide childcare benefits because they aren't a benefit that everyone can access, right? That you have to have a child and a child in a specific age group. And they're worried that their other employees will feel like this is an unfair benefit because it's not something they have access to. So that was something we wanted to explore, is how do employees who do not access the child care for one reason or another, how do they perceive it? And in order to do that, we really needed to have those honest conversations with folks. And we found that, again, I think that culture that Mark talked about, being respectfully blunt, we saw that with the employees. They were willing to talk to us about how they perceive the childcare and what it means for their work and their coworkers. And so we decided to organize this into a SWOT analysis, as strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to really take these interviews, code them, see what themes kept coming up and how Hudl and Primrose School at Hudl should approach those. Are they strengths to build on? Are they weaknesses where we can improve? Are they opportunities for the future? Or are they threats that we need to immediately address and think about really seriously? And so then after we gathered that qualitative data, anything that we thought could be either refuted or confirmed through quantitative data, we worked with the Hudl and Primrose teams and said, all right, here's what we're finding. And we would like you to provide us the enrollment data over time, or some general information about how many employees have children under 6, so we can start looking at rates of enrollment. And so we tried to, whenever we could, supplement those qualitative findings with some quantitative work.
It's a pretty in-depth process, and you guys have worked hard, and you just kind of wrapped up that report and ready to, share a little bit more about that. So we would love to hear more today about some of the key takeaways of this impact study. What did you learn?
Sure. So again, what we really learned, like I said, we did interviews, and we ended up interviewing over 70 people who were connected to the center or to Hudl, which is a lot of data. It's a lot of information, right? People talked for 20, 30, 45 minutes at a time, right? And we went through those, and we really tried to kind of manage what those themes were underneath. And what I can say is that the strengths outnumbered not just the weaknesses, but they outnumbered the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats combined. That what we saw was a really strength-based program. And you can actually access our report, and I'm happy to, I might actually ask one of my colleagues here, Amanda, if you could put the link into the chat so folks can access it. But what we saw is that Hudl wanted to know, are we meeting the needs of our employees by providing on-site childcare? And it was very clear that they were. They were responding to the demographic changes. And the most important thing we heard over and over again was that immediate access to childcare. Now, there was a group that had enrolled initially, right as the center opened. But then when we were talking to folks who had enrolled afterwards, they didn't automatically sign up at Primrose School at Hudl. They did their homework. Parents do their homework. And they were kind of blown away by the fact that they could just get in when they were ready, right? As soon as they wanted their child enrolled, they could. I think Suzanne, you working for Lincoln Littles, knows that that is not an experience that most parents have right now,
Right,
when they have
especially
that infant.
yeah, especially babies, infants and toddlers. We hear that consistently. Long, long waits. Get on the list as soon as you know you're having a baby. So that's a true benefit.
Absolutely. And the other thing that parents talked about was the role of quality and being able to not just access care, but access high quality care. A lot of parents talk to us in what they called their cost to quality comparison, right? What am I paying for and what am I getting for what I pay for? And they really said that this discounted tuition rate that they're receiving was paying for a service that should cost, and they know does cost, substantially more to provide. And so they were grateful to Hudl for making that something that works within their budgets, right? Works within their families' finances, that they were able to access a different level of care that they didn't think they could access otherwise without this benefit. So that was really important. I think those intangible benefits that Mark was talking about, right? That connection, and Betsy was mentioning this too. The parents talked about their community a lot. That they have truly developed a community where they have support for providing, for just parenting, right? As they're going through this stage of life, that they've developed that community within. We also saw replications of this conversation that we've had, that really strength-based management. We identified that as a strength. Right from the beginning, Mark said, I'm not a person who runs a childcare business, right? But that's why this partnership has been so successful, right? And also saying, I don't run a childcare business, but I view this as an investment for our employees, right? That the Hudl perspective is that this is an investment for their employees. And I do want to hit on really quickly, obviously we have a lot of different strengths that we're mentioning here. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting is when we talked to the folks who either are not parents or who are not enrolled. And across the board, they were really excited about the fact that Hudl offers this. They talk about it as a reflection of their values, right? So living out those Hudl values that you are a person first and an employee second. And they saw the child care center as that. And then the employees who are not enrolled at the center talked about how having on-site care made their jobs easier. And so when we think about this, what we saw is that employees who are not enrolled and who maybe most often who didn't even have children, their work life is still disrupted when other people have childcare challenges, right? And so they said that the people they're working with may need to run to the childcare really quickly. They don't notice that they're gone, right? If somebody wanted to attend an event at their childcare center, like a Halloween parade, that's a great example that would be happening today. If your children are not on site, that's a 2-hour minimum commitment. By the time you leave work, you drive there, you come back, or maybe you're taking the whole afternoon off. That's not how it works now at Hudl, right? Another example that kept coming up was Read Across America Week, that they could come downstairs and read stories to the children in the classroom and then come straight back up to work. Nobody notices, right? And for those of you that have heard me talk about this report, my favorite quote in all of the conversations that I had came from an employee who does not have any children. And they described having the childcare on site as making their day better because, and this is the quote, the unbridled joy of children makes everything better. And so then went on to tell a story about like making faces at kids in the window when they're coming in during the day and just sticking their tongues out at each other until everyone's laughing and then going up and starting work. I mean, I'm a parent. That's how I would want to start my day, right? Like that's a fun way to start your day and get things going right from the beginning. Now, that doesn't mean to say everything was always positive. And I think that's an important thing to note is that there are going to be growing pains. There are going to be lessons learned along the way. You know, one of the questions that Betsy had early on is why didn't folks enroll? And sometimes it was that variability around when are things going to open. And if you already have childcare and that childcare is quality care that you feel comfortable with, you're probably not going to change, right? And so there is going to be some slowness to that beginning part. And that's where you really need to have a partner who's willing to invest, like Hudl is early on. It's also important, and I don't want to overstep here because I am not an accountant, I am not a tax expert, but there are implications to providing discounted tuition for employees' taxes, right? Several of us may be familiar with things like the Child Independent Care Tax Credit. Those interact. Your health, or not health savings account, your dependent care savings account. That reduced tax interacts with your discounted tuition. And so part of this is because we conducted this evaluation, like I said, February and March. So right around tax time, after the first year of operations, the first full year of operations. And so around that time, several employees were hit with unexpected tax bills because they were putting money into a dependent care that they thought would be at a reduced tax rate. And because of the way things interacted, that didn't work out the way that they had anticipated. And I think both Mark and Betsy both said this is a lesson that we try to tell other businesses now when they're interested in opening an on-site or providing any sort of childcare benefit. You have to make sure you both have a good understanding of the interactions and have a clear communication plan for employees, right? And I think that's something that they've worked on since then, and now everything is good. But that first year, it can take folks by surprise if they don't know what they're looking for. When we talk about opportunities, I think this is where we talked to both Mark and Betsy about really collecting that long-term quantitative data, right? What does that look like over time? And that they're really in a good position to do that now so that they can make those future decisions about employee retention and improvement. But what we did see is that the center there are folks who are very much tied to Hudl. They were already committed, but they said, I would never leave now, right? I would never leave if it meant that I couldn't have access to this childcare. So we saw signs of that. But the nice thing is being set up with this information, they can track that over time. The last thing, there were very few risks, and some of those risks are some of those threats are very much related to early care and education generally. I think we all know, several of us on this call, that long-term stability of employees, the employees we spoke to at Primrose School, at Hudl, those educators, they love what they do and they care deeply, and they really demonstrated for us over and over again what is high quality care and education. But there were a few who said, it would be really hard for me to continue this career for my entire life. I would like to, but this is not a career that I'm sure I can make a living at over time. And that's acknowledging that they are making good pay for the industry, right? Up front, it was just, what does that look like in the long term? The other thing that we noted is that as Hudl undertook this because their demographics were changing. And so they're going to have to pay really close attention to how do those demographics continue to change over time, right? Are they serving a core group of people where there's not a lot of turnover, and what will that look like over time? And then the other thing we talked about is that early on, there were some perhaps misconceptions about what the benefit would look like, right? And so when some folks didn't feel like they could access it, especially those that had multiple children. We found it more with multiple children, or we're using family childcare that tends to cost less overall, that they did not necessarily feel like moving over to the center was in their financial interest or in their best interest at that time. I think there was a little bit of concern if they had thought they were going to get free or nearly free childcare from the beginning, right? And we did not see that with new employees who had come on board since the childcare opened. I think they had a good understanding of this is what it would cost, and maybe I will be able to access it someday, or I know that that's not in my budget. It was more with those employees who early on had maybe perceived that the discount would be different than what it was. But again, that was in a very few conversations relative to the overall positive. And that is it on the kind of overall analysis.
Well, the full report is amazing, and you did a great job of summarizing so much information into just a few segments there. So, we really encourage you to take time and take a look at that full report. But I think at this time, if there are questions from those of you on the call that you'd like a little bit more information, either from Katie or from Mark or Betsy, or I can't imagine you'd have a question for me, but I'm here. So if you want to ask one, let's go ahead and please just unmute yourself and tell us who you are and what your question is today. The long pause lets me know that we're not having many questions right now. And so I would encourage you, if you do have questions, to feel free to reach out to the participants on the call today and explore this further. And Katie would be a wealth of knowledge for you with anything she learned through the study too. So how would you like to wrap things up today?
I would just actually like to ask kind of Betsy and Mark, if you're thinking about what are the most important things another business, whether that is a childcare business owner or a business like Hudl, what would be the most important things they should think about if they're looking into on-site or any employee benefit with childcare?
You can go first.
Thanks. We've had this conversation in some smaller communities, and how they could make this accessible, right? And I think for a lot of those communities, it comes down to, do you have the workforce to make this a possible venture, right? I think you need to be honest in looking at the community and saying, do we have enough people who could help serve this community with the childcare option? So that would be kind of my first go on that. But to what Mark had said earlier, we're just hopeful that people will just start to have the conversation. And like I said, it can be daunting saying we're going to open up a brand new childcare. That takes some risk. But to have the conversation of, we've had even polling employees, and if it comes back and says this is something they need, how can we help them in the interim? If this is the end goal, are there things that we can do in terms of subsidizing their own preferred childcare center, or what does this look like from a business perspective? I think that's the goal of this. Is we have so many families that are now getting sandwiched with families at home, but also aging adults, grandparents at this point. And so with the rising costs of everything, childcare and aging parents, it's how can we all work together to offset some of that cost? So those would be kind of my two things.
I would say if it's something where you're looking to go this route, to take the plunge to provide on-site childcare, establishing that preferred partner up front and getting the right partner is such, I think, the most critical part of how this has been successful. Knowing that we were aligned from the very beginning, again, having those tough conversations. You don't want someone who's going to hide information or not be forthcoming or unwilling to have tough conversations when they need to be had. And so that to me is, if this is something that you're looking to get into, you have to make sure that you're getting that right partner that fits the needs of your business and whoever's going to be managing it from your business's perspective, because without that, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. But outside of that, I think it's really just kind of what Betsy described, just be willing to take the plunge in some way. You don't need to go the full length that we went, I don't think. I think there's a lot of other ways you can get involved when it comes to helping your employees with childcare. So be willing to talk with your employees about what they're looking for. But I know, like, I'm always available. I've had many people reach out to me over the past couple of years to talk about how Hudl has thought about this. So I'm always willing to have a one-on-one conversation about how you're thinking about it or what your business is interested in, and just provide some very open feedback about what our experience has been. So just be willing to have conversations with others, with your employees, and with other people in this space.
Can I add to it? Lincoln Littles is really set up well to help in this space too. If this is something a business is thinking about, or a childcare owner is thinking about, this type of a partnership, and we're happy to help navigate some of that process and make connections and give information. And so it's an additional resource here in Lincoln that isn't necessarily available throughout the state, but we're here in Lincoln ready to go and help as well.
And I think I would be remiss if we did not take the opportunity to mention that recent legislation has significantly increased the 45F tax credit for providing childcare benefits to employees. So it has historically been at about I think the maximum credit was around 150,000, not around, I believe it was 150,000. And now it has increased to a credit amount of up to 600,000, depending on the size of your business. Now, I think 500,000 for larger businesses, 600,000 for smaller businesses. And that credit is a tax credit for a proportion of your expenses, right? It's not a 100% you spend $600,000, you get $600,000 in tax credits. But with that recent change, I think it's really important that employers are exploring that and thinking about, well, maybe they were hesitant before, but there are some additional avenues to get support at the federal level as well. All right, I think that's it for us. We have about 5 minutes. I'm happy to stay on if folks have questions. If not, thank you so much, Suzanne, for moderating the panel, and Betsy and Mark, thank you for joining us and really letting people know about your experience. We appreciate all that you are doing for early childhood here in Nebraska and in Lincoln.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.